It's real life. Okay. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of AUA, Ask Us Anything. Good afternoon, Josh. How are you?
Wholeness, Denny. What's going on? I'm doing well. How about you?
Good. So we had we've been wanting to do this particular topic for a while, and about caregiving, because both you and I have experience on caregiving, and the topic hasn't changed. The format. I wish we had started with this format, which is more of a roundtable, and actually, someone trying to get access to, but.
Okay, well, Denny, while you do that, I'll jump in here with my little disclaimer. So, depending on who all joins or what Denny and I say, I just wanted to say that, obviously we're not doctors. I mean, that's pretty obvious. And that this is not medical advice, anything you hear. We're just sharing our thoughts and experiences. And everything here, I welcome feedback. So, if something is inaccurate, please write in and contact us so we can correct it, because I don't really would rather not have wrong information out there, misleading information. And the things, at least I say, will be for your own research, a starting point in your own research, perhaps. And that is not to believe or disbelieve anything we say, but to look into it for yourself, because ultimately everybody needs to see and know for their own selves, not just take what's said on its face alone, and then also take what's helpful and leave the rest. So anything that's not going to be helpful for you, just leave it behind, and you can take along what is helpful. So, and as Denny,
Let me
texting to get in here.
Yeah, so we have a student, March, who's trying to get in, and I don't know why the link doesn't work for her. But anyway, just in the spirit of equal time, since Josh took a little bit of time for the disclaimer, let me do the anti-disclaimer. If you follow what I said on the internet, you are a bigger fool than you think you are. Then I think you are. Okay, so this is your fault. Yeah, if you, I'm full of shit, and if you want to follow me, that's your problem.
Basically, what I said, maybe not so many words, but yeah.
Well, anyway, the reason, so anyway, we had a different format in mind, and in retrospect, I wish we had done the roundtable instead of interview. The interview was a little bit too formal. And I wish we had done this one, and so people are trying to get in here, and so I don't know why they can't get in. Anyway,
tell them to use a different browser. Try a different browser. I think it's use a Chrome-based browser.
Yeah.
It might be their browser.
March is actually on YouTube, so she can see us. She just can't join with the discussion. So hopefully, it could just be the browser that she's using. But anyway, I don't. Yeah,
you can try a different browser. Also, you can chat in YouTube, I think, too, and possibly we could read the chats too. Denny, do you have that up to read the live chat in YouTube?
Yeah, I am reading the chat.
Very well. Okay.
Okay, so here's my thought on what I like to do today, and Josh, anybody can chime in and see if that's the right approach to you. So I thought that since today's topic is caregiver roundtable, right? Caregiving roundtable. I thought that so what Josh and I was talking about is this, that if we focus on the caregiving part, it is so individualized. In my case, I'm caring for my dad, who's diabetic and suffer from dementia. Someone else might have some other problem. So each of those are so individualized that it's actually very hard to find something in common. Whereas the caregivers are practically the same. We are actually suffering from the same problem, which is that there's just not a whole lot of support for us. And so when I talk about the caregiver roundtable, it's really meant for that. It's really a peer support. And consistent with what I've been calling the fellowship, in the sense that I actually think of caregiving as a spiritual practice. That's how I see it. Now, originally we had scheduled for Samantha Nam to be our speaker to do the interview, and so I had prepared this one slide, which came from her book. Which is, and you can just read that. I think it's a very good listen, and I presume that the answers lies in her book. So if anyone who's interested, they should look up what she has to say. But Josh, out of that list, is there one or two items that you like to talk about first?
You know what? Maybe you could put the list back up then. I don't know, but the one thing that jumps out to me, that's, I don't know if it's on this list or not here. Excuse me while I lean in because of my nearsightedness. The big thing I usually hear about a lot is this term, which I don't really find all that helpful, at least once you kind of dissect it a little bit, is compassion fatigue. Now, I think that's kind of a misnomer, or I don't really feel that that's such a thing. The reason it can seem that way, it definitely, but the thing is that there's not enough, if that happens, there's not enough self-compassion, right? Because how do we meet something that needs compassion? Well, you meet it with compassion. So if you're getting tired from compassion, the only really thing that can be needed then is more compassion, and at that point, it's self-compassion.
Well, I think that's an amazing question, Josh. I think that's a great question. So let me, if I may, let me talk about my take on that. So first of all, let me back up a step. And so in studying Buddhism, we talk about the four immeasurables. So we talk about compassion, loving kindness, empathy, and equanimity. Question always is that what exactly is the difference between compassion? Compassion and loving kindness is easier to explain, because compassion is, at least if I were to translate from Chinese, compassion is someone who's always there to want to solve problem, whereas loving kindness is not necessarily to solve people's problem, but to just provide that feeling of love. And so I always equate that to the mother and the father. You run to your dad and your dad would solve the problem for you. And then the mom would just give you the love. It's not exact, but that's sort of how I understood the difference. The question then is that what is the difference between compassion and empathy? Because again, my generation, I'm quite a bit older than you, but in my generation, not only in terms of my age, but also in terms of my background being from the third world and all that, I would have to say that we don't really understand empathy all that much. We understand compassion, but we don't quite understand empathy. So for example, I often have to have this discussion with my wife, when the kids come to us, we like to solve problem. We just like, this is what you do, dot, 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 and like this. And then half the time, actually more than half the time, all the time, that's not what they want to hear. That's not what they want to hear. They just thought that they come to you and share with you, and rather than sharing, we just, it's not like we want to shut off the conversation. It's just that it's much more natural for us, the way that we were brought up, to just say, let's just solve the problem, move on. So to me, the difference between compassion and empathy is, at least that's my interpretation, is that empathy is compassion without judgment. Without judgment. Because ultimately it leads to equanimity, which is, equanimity is sensation without perception. It's really using your spiral cord so that you really understand what's going on without really making your own judgment, right? So when you say compassion fatigue, that's real. That's real. And so compassion fatigue is when you throw your entire being into what you do, and then you find out that it's just way too much. And whereas a lot of times you just have to kind of stand back and say, hey, I am here to provide loving kindness or without actually getting emotionally involved. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So I'll jump into my take on the Brahma Viharas here too. And that's interesting. So this to make sure that I understand you're right. The empathy part you said is caring without judgment, right? Where compassion is caring with wanting to do something about it, right? And then equanimity is without kind of without perception, right? Is that how you explained it? Because those are new ways of understanding it for me. I went to rehash that and get that.
I understand what you said, and I understand that might be what you think I said. Mm-hmm. I think that what I said might not be accurate. It might not be, because it's a concept that's very, very difficult to explain. So let me just back off and say, in Buddhism we talk about Guan Yin, the Bodhisattva of mercy. And I often explain to my parents or whoever else, I said, have you ever noticed that Guan Yin's eye is always looking down? You walk up to the Guan Yin statue, you can never see her eye, because she doesn't care who you are. She does not judge you. She's not going to say, oh, Josh, he's a good guy, I'll help him. Denny, he's an ex-con, he just murdered someone, I'm not going to deal with that. No, as far as Guan Yin is concerned, as far as the Bodhisattva of mercy is concerned, he or she does not judge. Okay, so to me, Guan Yin represents all four: compassion, loving kindness, empathy, and equanimity. Now, how exactly do I differentiate that? I don't know. But the totality of that is what Guan Yin represents.
Beautiful, lovely. Yes, and there's no, it's just like Guan Yin hears the cries of the world, right? So the way I look at the Brahma Viharas, is through the Pali and what I've been taught and practiced too. And I really like Denny's translation of mudita as empathy. It's often translated as vicarious joy. I really like that one too. So the thing is, though, that mudita is celebration as well. So it's being happy for other people's happiness is the way it's kind of taught in the Theravada tradition. Sympathetic joy. So it's like, I think the Dalai Lama once said something like, well, there's how many billion people in the world? Well, that increases our chance for happiness if we can be happy for their happiness. Now, this is one of the most challenging things for me, is the mudita. It's being happy for people's happiness. Jump in here.
Now, this is the key. This is the key. Let's bring it back to caregiving.
Yes.
And let's bring it back to what you and I call compassion fatigue.
Okay.
So I'll use myself as an example. I in the past, I talk about how my dad, who suffers from dementia, he goes in and out. Now, more and more, he doesn't recognize me. There was a time when he recognized me, and then he get confused. He get confused when all of a sudden he see me taking up the needle, injecting insulin, or checking his blood, or all these technical things that I do. He does not equate that with his son. That's not the son that he knows. So as soon as I do anything like that, he thinks that I'm a worker. And you could just tell, just his demeanor changes. He's actually much more courteous, whereas me as his son, it's the usual father and son kind of expression. Now, more and more, I would say almost 100% now, he doesn't recognize me as his son. In fact, yesterday, he even questioned my mom, because now he at least he recognized my mom as his wife. And he recognized he actually asked asked his wife, my mom, why she called me her son. She's totally confused. He's totally confused about that. Now, the question is, as a caregiver, typically this is very painful to see this kind of degeneration in your loved one. And you really, really, really want that person to get better. And so in addition to the physical caregiving, there is the emotional caregiving, because you really want that in return. You like to be able to help your dad, and then it's really good that if your dad recognizes you as your son, as his son. Now, I actually use all my spiritual practice as a caregiver. And so I practice equanimity. I practice empathy. I practice loving kindness. I practice compassion. So what you just said about empathy is happiness for the sake of other people's happiness.
Well, okay. So empathy is a little bit different than what I was talking about, but the Pali word is mudita. So you're translating it, or that's translation empathy, which I don't think is wrong by any means. I'm just, however, translating it as being happy for other people's happiness. While empathy doesn't really judge, it just feels what another person is feeling. Yeah. So you're putting yourself in their shoes. And actually, here's a plug that I have an article coming up about dharmic strategies for empaths. It's the longest article I wrote. It's in 9 sections. So stay tuned for that. But anyway, going back to what Denny was saying, the closest thing I came to this is when my grandmother, she got the same type of way towards the end, where she didn't even really know who anybody was anymore at all. So, I mean, for me, it's just, at first it was annoying, right? Our family was like, "Oh, you've told us that so many times, you keep repeating the same thing over and over again." And so it was like this kind of frustration in our family about her repeating the same things over and over. And then also, forgetting things and just kind of the same repetitive behavior. And so one thing it taught me is patience, because how frustrating it was at first, but then it just kind of got like, wow, I mean, this is really possible for the human mind to degrade this much. And so I was looking for silver linings too to this. And one thing I noticed about my grandmother is that there were some things she kept repeating that were really actually important in her life. Some things about, let's just say, an abusive situation she was in. She would repeat that over and over to me. And these are things that she had clung on to her whole life. So this was a way that was kind of forcing her to let go of this. Now, I'm not saying this is going to be the case in everybody's situation, and this could be totally a delusion on my part. I don't know. But as it went on, that story that she was clinging and complaining about over and over again, it finally fell away at one point. Although, obviously some more positive things like recognizing people also did too. That was one silver lining. The other one was just like Denny was saying with spiritual practice, is just to be present with something that is just so unbearably unpleasant. It's just like this inner agitation that I was feeling when I was with her, hearing these things and being completely really oblivious to pretty much everything that was going on with her and around her.
Well, the thing that I learned is that all living beings, whether it's human being or just, like a piece of grass. The number one priority is to survive. So this is back in the days when I was a junior professor at UCLA. UCLA was kind of interesting. It was first known as the southern campus of the University of California, Berkeley. That's what is known. And then so it had to grow in the shadow of the number one campus, which is UC Berkeley, where I did my study. And so by the time I got down to UCLA, I noticed that it's very different. They pay a lot of attention on the landscape. It's one of the most beautiful campuses. And it turns out that the chancellor actually start his day just walking on, it's known, everybody knows that, walking along the campus to making sure that all the landscapes are right. He knows everybody. He knows all the gardeners. And so it's very, very meticulous. I mean, just beautiful campus. And so as I was walking to class, I noticed that however much you try to mow the lawn or to kill the weed, they keep growing. They just keep growing because all living beings want to stay alive. Okay? So I think one of the things that we underestimate is how people suffer from dementia find a way to survive. So a lot of the pain that I see people express when they are with people with dementia are not from the patient. That person, like my dad. I keep talking about my dad because he's the only person I know who suffers from dementia. He's not. The problem is not he's not suffering from mental illness. He's suffering from a brain deficiency. So it's an extension of his diabetes. So basically, parts of his brain are not communicating. So it's very interesting that he recognizes all his grandchildren. He recognizes all his grandchildren. But he doesn't recognize me or my brothers or my mom. Most of the time, not even my mom. And because for him, in his brain, he has a part where we were much younger than we are today. And so he doesn't make the connection. He doesn't understand how this could possibly be my son because my son used to look like this. Because we just gotten so old. And whereas the grandkids, I think in his mind, they don't change that much. And so he recognized them. So it's not like he's in pain, always worry about, how come these people are not with me? Because he even said that, I don't understand why my 3 sons have abandoned me. He said that. He said that to me. And now I can just take him and shake him and say, I'm here. Or I can just say, oh, wow, I don't need it. I just work here.
What comes to me is I wonder if it's just kind of like a regression, It's going back into a childhood and childlike state for whatever reasons, maybe to resolve things in childhood. Who knows? I mean, now I'm sounding like an armchair psychologist. But yeah, Denny, I didn't know that until now. What you just said. So
my observation is that being a human being, even if you suffer from dementia, you're still a human being. The number one objective for a human being or any kind of being is to survive. So the thing that we underestimate is how much they have changed their existence just to survive. And so if they have a question about why their family abandoned them, and they have a equally important question about who are these people who are caring for me, instead of trying to find the answer, instead of trying to find that connection, which what you and I would think, it's right here and right here, put it together. Because it's just too painful for them to put it together. And so they will avoid that decision. They would just say, okay, fine, I'm going to put that aside. And I'm just going to focus on how to just live day by day now, dealing with this new set of people who are actually here caring for me. So most of the pain that I see, I actually see this all the time when my relatives come visit my dad, like his siblings. And the first thing they would do is say, "Do you recognize me? I'm so and so." They even bring pictures and say, "Do you remember this?" And I'm just saying, "Shut the fuck up! Get the fuck out of here! You're just making more pain for them." It's more. It's actually more. Why are you doing this? He doesn't need any of this crap.
Well, it's a good point, Denny. And another, but then again, they don't know that, so they have to be told that too.
They don't know that because they're not a nobody knows that.
Well, that's right.
Nobody knows that. Nobody knows that. And so when I talk about caring for the caregivers, what I'm really talking about is how important it is to bring spiritual practice to the givers.
And this overrides.
It's the only way to survive. Well, there's no other way that you can help this person, okay? Because caregiving, especially if you're not doing it as a profession. See, if you're doing a profession, then there's no such thing as compassion fatigue, because when you clock out, you clock out. It's someone else's problem. It's a different shift. But when you're caring for your loved ones, there is no clocking out.
That's right. It's different.
And so the compassion fatigue is part of the game. And so how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that? The only way you can deal with that is to get on with the program, which is to get on with the spiritual practice that we've been talking about.
Well, absolutely. We have to carve out time for ourselves to do that practice with a distance away from the caregiving, at least even just for a short amount of time. It has to be, right, Denny? You have to, you have to have some time away, just a little bit, for a spiritual practice, even though you're still doing the spiritual practice interwoven into it.
You can talk about, you can think of the spiritual practice as downtime, just like caring for yourself, and to have the time where you can kind of say, hey, I just need some downtime now. You can think of it like that. That's the back in the days, when you used to go to Disneyland, you get a book of tickets. Okay, so that's an A ticket. Okay. So what's the E ticket, right? The E ticket is the one that, you get to do the merry-go-round, the big rides. So what's a big ride? What is? It just comes back to knowing the difference between pain and suffering. That's it. Knowing that, because when what we call emotional pain is actually just physical pain, because this is the difference, that your brain is physical. The brain is part of the body. So when we talk about, last time when we had Beth on the show, we talked about physicality versus spirituality, materiality versus mentality. The one thing that we have to make very clear is that the brain belongs to materiality. The brain belongs to materiality. So when you see when you see someone and you're in pain, you have to understand that that's still only physical pain. That's still only physical pain. But you continue to suffer. Okay, you continue to suffer. It's when it's gone beyond your brain. It's actually gone beyond your brain. There's a whole new world out there that is beyond your physical body. When that part, when that's the suffering part. That is the suffering part. Okay, so you can't really do this without bringing in our Buddhist teaching. We go around in circle trying to make this secular. You can't do it. You can't do it. You really have to get into the core of the teaching of Buddha to really understand how to help a caregiver. And it comes down to this. It comes down to when Buddha became enlightened, he did that under the Bodhi tree. Being enlightened means that he finally elevated himself to a spiritual being, beyond what we call the realm of desire, beyond the body, beyond our eye, our nose, our mouth, our tongue, our body, and our brain. What he encountered was somebody called Mara. Mara. Now, who is Mara? Mara is the person who's actually guarding the realm of desire. So he is that person that his job is to prevent us from escaping the realm of desire. He is the guy that want to make sure that we are constantly suffering. And the suffering, a caregiver is the e-ticket to suffering. Okay? It is the e-ticket to suffering. So what is the solution? You have to bring in the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha's teaching is this. It's just very simple. That the way your mind works, I'm not talking about the brain. The way your mind works is we talk about the 5 skandhas. We talk about the form, the sensation, the perception, the sankhara, and the consciousness. Somewhere in there is going from mentality, somewhere in there is going from materiality to mentality. That's when the sensations get collected in the spiral cord, we call that sensation. It gets delivered to your brain, we call that perception. And then eventually it generates what's called mental factors, the 51 mental factors. What we call the kusala versus the akusala. The kusala are the one that is wholesome or skillful, and the akusalas are the one that is unwholesome. And then we take out of the 51 mental factors, more than 2/3 of them are unwholesome. Then what we do is we summarize that into the 5 hindrances. Okay. When you're caring for someone, whether you are a caregiver or care providers, the 5 hindrances is right in front of you. It is as clear as a book. What causes suffering as the caregivers? The first one is called clinging. You are clinging to something that you prefer, that is a good feeling. It's I cling to my father. I think about how we used to spend time together when I was a child, that he would hold my hand, walk me down the shore after work, talk to me about the movie we just watched, or he taught me how to ride a bicycle, or he taught me how to swim. I cling to that. I cling to that. That's the first hindrances. It's called clinging. The second hindrances of that is either called aversion or ill will. Is that when you encounter feeling or sensation that you don't like, you react negatively. You get upset, either at the person or at yourself. Most of the time, when the caregivers are upset at the care receivers, they are upset at themselves. Okay? They're upset at themselves. So my mom and I are co-givers. So I take 2 shifts, she takes 1 shift. I go there, I wouldn't say that. I take 1.5 shifts, she takes 1.5 shifts. So I break my shift into 2. Every morning from 7:30 to 9 o'clock, I teach my Cantonese class. My mom is actually one of my students. And so as soon as I'm done, I drive over. I do the exact practice my dad Then I let him do the exercise. He rides on the stationary bicycle if he can. Then I give him a shower, and then I leave. And my mom takes over, feed him, whatever. Then I come back at around 8 o'clock when they're already asleep. I woke up my dad, gave him the last medicine, and then I sleep next to him and wake him up in the middle of the night so he can go to the bathroom. And then around 5 o'clock, 5:30, I leave. Okay, so we're co-givers. As a spiritual practice, I am just maybe half a step ahead of my mom. Okay, so I would explain these things to her, and then she's finally catching on. She's actually finally catching on that she said, well, it really doesn't matter to me anymore if he remembers me or not. I accepted it. It's okay if he doesn't remember me as his wife. It's not a problem. She actually, in Chinese, now she's someone who doesn't even read and write in Chinese. She's 84 years old. She comes from the era when girls in the Chinese societies are completely abandoned. They don't get education. So she doesn't even read and write in Chinese, let alone English. She said to me, she says, I just gonna practice equanimity. I said, whoa, holy crap. This is like Buddha talking to me. That's the only way you can survive is to really practice what Buddha teach about the source of suffering. Break it down into the 5 hindrances. The first one is clinging. You have to understand that as a givers, all your pain and suffering comes from clinging. You want to cling to something that in the past.
Totally, Denny.
Second one is because of the clinging, you have aversion or ill will, all the negativity. Now, it's really easy to understand clinging and aversion because if you ever visit a Tibetan temple, they have this thing called the Wheel of Life, which are the 6 realms: human, deva, hell, hungry ghost, animal, and so forth. And if you ever see that sign, or you just look it up, Google, look it up, Wheel of Life, just focus in the middle. The middle has a circle, and there's 3 different animals. One bites the tail of the other. There's a bird, there's a snake, and then there's a pig. I'm just going to explain the bird and the snake. The bird actually came from, the bird actually is extinct. The bird came from North India. It was a pet, and the pet is known to, if the owner died, the pet would just stop eating and die with the owner. It's no wonder they're extinct. But the idea is that Buddha uses that animal to symbolize clinging, okay, attachment. Buddha uses the snake to symbolize aversion. Aversion is not anger. Aversion is really react negatively. So if you ever step on a snake, they're not going to say, hey, wait a minute, I know you don't mean it, so next time I'm going to bite your ass, but not this. No, they're not going to do that. They're not. Their only reaction is that they will react negatively. That's why the snake is used for aversion. So understand that all your suffering as a caregiver. This is important because it turns out that statistically, anyone who has become a caregiver for family, after the job is done, they themselves will get into all kinds of health problems. They themselves, because it's such a stressful, and it's not physical stress. It's not just physical stress. It's emotional stress. So the only way that you can provide relief for the caregivers, again, the topic today is how to caring for the givers, right? Is to really bring that Buddhist teaching up front and just say, here's what Buddha says, here's your source of suffering, it's the 5 hindrances, it's the attachment, it's the aversion, It's what's the other three?
The other one don't come in quite as much, but they do a little bit.
They do.
I'll just name them and then I'll jump in here. Sloth and torpor. So those are old kind of words for just kind of lethargy, being really tired and sleepy. And the other, the fourth one is worry and restlessness, anxiousness. That one can come in, and then the fifth one is doubt.
No, actually, if you change the wording to be more modern, it's actually just depression and anxiety.
Yeah, that's some people can immediately relate with. Yeah,
and
sloth is more of the body, and torpor is more of the mind.
Yeah.
But you can be depressed in body.
Oh,
and mind.
you're depressed all the time. As a caregiver, you're depressed all the time because initially you thought that you're making doing good, and then you just say it's so out of control. It's not going to get better.
And so
it's a fact. It's a fact that most people who nobody can take care of a loved one until they die, because some point it's out of your hand. It's too much for you. It's too much for you.
That's right.
And so, like my dad, he right now it's not so much incontinence. It's just that he has the sensation, but by the time he gets to the bathroom, it's already too late. So my mom has to jump in and clean up. And my mom said, and so I told my mom, I said, look, it's bad, but it's not that bad, because just think about what happens when dad is finally bedridden. At least he can walk. We can help him into the bathtub and just shower him. That's it. And so my mom finally picked up and said, yeah, it's okay. It's okay. We can do this.
That's right. And we're going to, it seems like in life, we have challenges, but we're really hardly ever going to be met with something that we can't handle. I mean, it can be really tough, but we're going to get kind of the degree that we can handle in the moment. And so, unfortunately, that's going to prepare you for when it may get worse. So I wanted to say about Denny's thing about Buddhism, that we have to go into Buddhism. And I totally agree. I want to point out, though, the distinction here being that the term Buddhism, that's a Western term. Buddhism is not really a religion in the same sense. It's an investigation into reality, seeing things as they actually are, right? There's no requirements to believe or disbelieve anything. There's no worship or anything like that in other religions. Not that any of those things are necessarily bad, but it's kind of a terminology that was given by Westerners as a religion. Now Denny's thing about, this is nothing to do with your dad so much, but I see this more and more, this survival programming, I call it, that, if you go and look at TV and movies and content, and there's this kind of push and program to survive at any cost. And I totally get that. I mean, obviously, you're kind of crazy if you have a choice to live or die, you're obviously going to take the one to live, right? But it seems like it's been amped up to 11 now. And this really just, Denny mentioned Kuan Yin, and it just springs to mind these beautiful factors about these beings who are so selfless that they're there to help at any cost, and this is such something to look up to and embody if we can, when we can, that, that service and helping is that important, that it's more service to others instead of service to self, right? We can all really immediately recognize when someone is a service to self being, right? They will do anything at anybody's expense just for themselves to benefit. While the service to others is we take care of ourselves so we can help others. So that's one thing that brought up. Now, Denny's saying about pain and suffering, the core of what he was talking about, there's this, I forget what Dharma teacher said this, but they said pain times resistance equals suffering. So the more we resist the pain, the more it turns into suffering. Another quick point is that this word, there's suffering in English, that's a really strong word. The Pali word is dukkha, right? So it can also just be interpreted, translated as stress. And even subtler, it can be translated as unsatisfactoriness. Like, oh, this just really isn't doing it. I mean, this is okay for now, but then I want this now, and then I get that. Well, then that's not good enough. I want this and this and this. And it's just like this feeling that this really isn't doing it for us. A few other things, circling back around, I love how Denny and we can talk in some more spirals instead of the traditional linear thinking here. So what this does, I mean, it did for me too, and I kind of like deferred this to my grandmother when I was talking about that, but actually it was bringing up things in me that I really didn't know was there. Like, I was not expecting myself to react and feel the way I felt when I was experiencing being around her and seeing her behavior, things she said, things she didn't say, things she did. What came up in me, it was really surprising of how I viewed that and responded to that, and or just sometimes being just as bewildered as her about what to say or do or how to view it. That was another thing. And then I'm going to let Denny jump in a little bit here, but I want to get back though to the Brahma Viharas, because we all this, life is hard. Life isn't for sissies, right? I mean, being a human being isn't easy. And so that's why we deserve more love, not less. And it's not a selfish love. It's a love like the four flavors of love that are the Brahma Viharas, things that are actually beautiful and uplifting and very helpful, not just for ourselves, but everyone around us. Even if we don't practice it for others, even if we would just practice it for ourselves, everyone we come in contact with benefits from these practices. So I'm going to let Denny jump in here, but then I want to get back to the Brahma Viharas and how important these can be. And I know some of the talk on suffering, they can be, these Buddhists, they're party poopers, I don't, a lot of the stuff is really kind of subtle, and you have to have a steady practice, almost formal practice sometimes to see a lot of this stuff. But the one thing that's immediately apparent to just about everybody is the Brahma Viharas, right? And especially like the compassion. Even if we can't have compassion, we could have compassion for the fact that we don't have compassion right now. That honesty is actually a form of self-love too.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you said, Josh. I just wanted to come back to what you said earlier about compassion fatigue. And so
yes,
kind of draw a circle around everything that we said so far. I think it all comes down to having the right skill, having skill. That's the most important part, is that it's not just about having the words so you could explain it and then think that you understand it, but it's actually having the skill. And the
that's
skill
wisdom.
is actually the skill is actually very, very simple. The skill comes back to just mindfulness. Okay, now the problem is that the English word mindfulness is used and is abused, is misused, and everybody uses it for their own reason. When we talk about mindfulness, it's important to make the distinction between mindfulness as the English word and right mindfulness as a Buddhist concept. So it's very important to bring that right mindfulness. So mindfulness is sati, and right mindfulness is samasati. And so since we're now talking about Buddhist teaching, the most basic of the Buddhist teaching is the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths basically is like the 12 steps program. Understand suffering, know what is suffering, know where, the source of suffering, and, here's the path to relieve yourself of suffering. And so the path, when it gets down to the last one, the path kind of expresses itself into this Eight Noble Path. And in that, it's actually divided into three parts, and mindfulness is just one step in that. And so mindfulness just means remember. That's all it means. It doesn't mean any more than that, remember. So why is that such an important skill? Is that if you have the training so that you always remember your mind, then you have a better chance of not degenerate into the five hindrances. So example that I use is this, and only because most of my students are grandmothers, including my own mother. And I said, now back in the days when you were a little younger and you used to help raise your grandchildren and you have to take them to school. This is typical San Francisco neighborhood kind of activity. Do you remember if you hold a hand? And they would say, yeah, of course you hold the hand. You hold the hand when you cross the street, right? Yeah, of course. Even on the sidewalk, we hold the hand all the time. Why is it that it's so important to hold the hands? Well, they said, well, if you don't hold the hand, they get run over by a car, or they would run away and get kidnapped. That's what happens when you're not mindful of your mind. When you don't know where your mind is, it will get kidnapped by the hindrances. Okay, so the very first time that my dad had an accident, and it was actually outside, and so I quickly, bring him to the men's room, and he went into the store and he closed the store behind me. I said, no, don't close. I need to come in and help you because, it's a big mess. And he says, no, it's going to smell really bad. He said, Dad, don't worry. I smell my nose. I don't smell with my mind.
That's true, because just think how many people don't even realize they're smelling. They're just reacting to unpleasantness, right?
I smell my nose, so it's pain. It's painful for my nose. But since I know where my mind is on my body when I'm moving. It's on my hand. It's on my body. It's on my breath. My mind doesn't get kidnapped by the hindrances. So it doesn't degenerate into suffering. So I'm smelling the bad smell, but I don't suffer from the bad smell. So when you're a caregiver and you don't even have that basic skill, then you don't understand. You have no way of discerning the difference between physical pain or even pain of your brain, your memory, versus the true pain, which is the mental pain, which is beyond the body. But if you do have that skill, it's a simple skill. It's really what we do every Saturday is as soon as we start exercise, adjust your body, calibrate your body, adjust your mind, calibrate your mind, put your mind in the center of your palm, raise your hand, focus on your wrist, and guess what? As you do that, you become very sensitive to your body. You become very sensitive to your breath. And they're like the canary in the cave. So as soon as your mental state degenerate, you're the last to know because your mind is already somewhere else. But your body says, hey, go, something's happening. Something is happening. And so you know how to bring it back. You know how to bring it back.
And I love this metaphor of the holding the hand, and this can also come out of love too. It's like our mind is like a little child, and we have to hold its hand because we care about it, and we don't want it wandering off and getting in trouble when it just doesn't know any better. It's not the kid's fault that it would do that. It just hasn't grown up and matured and been trained and learned yet. So we hold the hand until we can hold the hand of our mind too, until it gets better training and we can show it love as well, right? Until it gets some training like that. The other thing I mentioned, pain times resistance equals suffering. Also, this comes into the three characteristics, one of a higher teaching, but it's also when pain happens to a me, it can also suffering. So this is kind of like a strategy. So when we look at the five aggregates and start breaking down, well, what is this? Is this really personal? Is this pain really about me? I don't know. I would say not. I would say that it's not happening to a permanent, solid me, because it's not going to be constant like that forever. But a lot of times we automatically react and think, oh my goodness, I'm in pain and it's going to be like this forever. Usually when we experience pain, and it's just, it really tricks us a a lot, at least it does me like that. So.
Yeah. So one other thing that maybe we should wrap it up now. One thing that I would like to share, again, coming from my own experience, is that.
And I wanted to finish with the Brahma Viharas though too, but please go ahead, Denny.
The thing that I like to share is that when you're caring for someone who's dying, okay. Now, by the way, we're all dying. We're all going to die someday. It's just that this one is a little bit more obvious. It's just dying in front of you. In my case, I'm not asking anybody else to do this, but in my case, I don't try to fix the problem. There's no fixing death. There's no way to avoid death. So my objective is not to reverse death. My objective is not even to think that someday it's going to get better. There's no getting better. It's just going to get worse. Every day is going to be worse. So your good days are already past. The good days is behind you. So again, this is my objective. I'm not saying that anybody else should be doing this, but I thought this through, and so in my case, it's about slowing down the deterioration. But more important than that is that I want my dad to die with dignity. That's what I can do. That's what I can do, is that I can give him a little bit more dignity.
Absolutely, and it's so immediate for you now about that. And just imagine a world where everybody showed everybody dignity as just a basic common human courtesy. And I aspire to do that and live in a world where we should all show each other dignity and express dignity and receive dignity too. It's so very important. As far as the death thing goes, we have our ups and downs, the highs and lows, but that's one of the 5 things the Buddha said to reflect on every day, is that we haven't gone beyond death. Death is going to happen. I think it was J. Krishnamurti that said one of the society's greatest illnesses is people seeing death happen all around them and not thinking it's going to happen to them. And so this is not to get bummed out. This is to be in alignment with the truth. And so when we're in alignment with the truth, that can actually bring happiness. We appreciate every moment we have as very precious, and we can enjoy it more when we realize how immediate and how short this life is, right?
Yeah. Well, also, I appreciate what you just said, and I want to bring it back to something you said earlier about the word Buddhism. Buddhism it's just another ism, which is very unfortunate that when you say Buddhism, you said, I'm not a Buddhist, I'm this and I'm that, so therefore I'm not this one. That's not, Buddha was so the people who practice Buddhism, we use the word Dharma. And Dharma has different meaning. It could mean the truth, it could mean the path, it could mean the teaching. It's just depending on how you use the word Dharma. And so if you want to use the word Dharma as in truth, then it's essentially saying that everything has to die. Because that's quantum physics. That the world consists of material and materiality, and it consists of mentality or physicality versus spirituality. Einstein says that the reason why we have time is because we have space. So the beginning of the universe was the beginning of space, and now that you have space, you can travel. And so now you have time. The minute that you have time, then you can distinguish between materiality versus mentality. So the minute that you understand that I am of the material world, then you have to die.
Yes, unfortunately, in this realm that we're in at this current time, that seems to be the case. In fact, that is the case as far as I know.
So a Buddhist, someone who practiced Buddhist teaching, what we want to do is to move away from the material world into the spiritual world, because the spiritual world has no time.
And I would say we're also here to master physicality too. And sometimes as we practice, the spirit and matter can come together as well. So I think that's another interesting fact. Well, I wanted to talk about the Brahma Viharas again real quick. The loving kindness is where it starts. And this, I like the term unstoppable friendliness. Really like that. So it's just a well-wishing for others. I'll give you my phrases real quick. May you be safe inside and out. May you be happy and joyful. May you be healthy and strong. May you live knowing ease. And may you realize awakening and be free. So I'll just leave it there. And the compassion phrases, there's actually some formal compassion phrases that I'll use for myself and others. And the first one is really important, it's just acknowledging the pain. I acknowledge your pain. The second one is I care about your pain, at least to the ability that I'm able to right now. Yeah. May your pain release, and may you know peace.
Yeah.
And also practical compassion is, what can I do? How can I help? Is there anything I can do? Now, the one the empathetic joy, or I like to call it vicarious joy, there's some phrases that I use that are kind of the more formal ones. Or, may your happiness continue. May your happiness increase. May your happiness never stop. So it's kind of like a rejoicing for other people's happiness when it's that way. And then the equanimity is kind of like the grandparent love, right? The one where they've seen it all before, they've already been through this before. So it's kind of like I care so much about you. However, you're your own person. You have to make your own decisions and be responsible for your own decisions, so.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So Josh, I think we should close, and I wonder if I could close with just the following.
Please.
Just kind of picking up on what you said. Let me go back to my small army of Cantonese-speaking grandmother again. And so I talk about how I use different examples to bring Dharma to them. And so one of the ways that I bring Dharma to them is I ask them, this is back in the days that we're actually doing face-to-face practice. And I said, how's the sun today? And they look out, and they think that I'm stupid. They think that I'm crazy. And then they say, there's no sun, right? You must be crazy. So I said, okay, well, how was the sun yesterday? And they said, oh, the sun was good. Yesterday the sun came out. It was a good day. And then I have to say, you know what? The sun was always there. The sun shines upon you every day. The difference is, yesterday there were no cloud. Today there is cloud. So today we talk about the importance for caregivers, the importance of providing caring for the givers. The concept that we bring forth, on one hand, is called the four immeasurables: the compassion, the loving kindness, the empathy, and the equanimity. On the other hand is the five hindrances, which are the clinging, the aversion, the depression, the anxiety, and the doubt. Think of them as the sun and the cloud. The sun shines upon you every day of the week, every week of the year. That's what Josh and I focus on. That's why you can tell that we are sunny, every day is a sunny day for us, because that's what we focus on. We focus on practicing the compassion, the loving kindness, empathy, and the equanimity. That's the sun. And we have learned some skills to push aside the cloud. Not always, not entirely, but at least we know what the cloud is. The cloud is clinging, aversion, depression, anxiety, and doubt. And when you are caregivers, you have to be very careful, because if you didn't have the skill, the cloud is on you every day.
That's totally right. And even when, it's nighttime, the sun is still shining. It's nourishing the earth, and the earth is nourishing you every moment. So even when it seems like well, you don't have, that's just a fact, right? Even if you can't see it, everything's still living, and the sun does that. And so if the whole world's even against you, the sun is still there nourishing you every moment of the day.
Yes.
Every moment of the night indirectly.
Yes.
So it's there and nourishing us. And that's not to deny the clouds aren't there. We don't pretend that they're not there and be Pollyannish and deny what's bad. It's just what the Buddha said was what you frequently think and ponder upon becomes the inclination of the mind. So the more we focus on these beautiful states like the four immeasurables, the more likely our mind is going to be nourished and fed by those things. So, Denny, it's been such a pleasure and a joy, and it's so cool
Thank
hearing
you.
all
So
your
if I may,
where you're
if
at
I,
and what you're doing.
if I may offer a metta chant to all our fellow caregivers, first in English, then in Pali. May all beings be free from animosity and negative energy. May all beings be free from mental suffering. May all beings be free from physical suffering. May all beings be full of joy and protected with positive energy. Sate sata avaya hantu, sabe sata ayapaja hantu, sabe sata anaga hantu, sabe sata sukhi atano pariharantu. Thank you, Josh.
Thanks so much, Denny.
Okay, until next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.